Hello, I'm Angela. Today I'm talking about the core. Now, is the core really that important? Does it really warrant doing its own workouts just for the core? And what happens if we don't work it out? And aren't we working it out anyway when we're doing other exercises? But anyway, hang around. I'll be talking about that and also showing you a few exercises where the core comes in very handy. Now, there's a lot more to the core than just these abdominal muscles. We have what we call an inner and an outer core. Our inner core involves a group of muscles, mostly through this area, which help us to maintain stable. We call them our stabilizers. And that includes some deep spinal muscles, our diaphragm, our pelvic floor, which holds our organs in place, and also some deeper muscles right through this midsection. One that you may have heard of is the transverse abdominis, or the TA muscle. And this muscle attaches from our spine right through the midsection. Look, it's almost like a big sheet, like a corset actually, and connects the bottom of our ribs to the top of our hips as well. So it has quite a few different attachment points around that area, and very important for us being upright. But our center of gravity will change depending on how we move. And I always like to think of the core as being the regulator of our center of gravity. If we're bending forward or rotating, lifting a leg, lifting a weight, walking or running or dancing or doing some sort of movement, our balance is going to be off, our stability is going to be off. And that's where we have all these other muscles right through this torso that actually help us to stay stable. So we have more muscles on the, over the top of the transverse abdominis, more spinal muscles running down our spine. We have some upper back muscles which keep us upright and keep our shoulders in the right position for what movements they're going to be doing. We also have our pelvic muscles, our glute muscles, our hip flexors, that all help us in different ways to actually move. And thus, they're part of our core as well in many ways. So you can see it's a lot more than just fine-tuning and talking about one or two muscles. It's quite a big area of our body. The challenge we have is, to a large extent, our lives and what types of activities we do. If we're spending a lot of our time in a seated position, we do start to get a bit lazy through these muscles, and their relative input to movement may be a bit off. So we're not moving as efficiently, and thus we're also prone to injuries. So a lot of injuries that we have, whether it's in our hips, our knees, our shoulders, and especially our older back as we get into menopause and beyond, are likely, very likely brought on because the rest of our core is just not working as efficiently as it should do. So it is good to have these core muscles as part of our regular exercise routine. Now, keep in mind that core muscles are not like other traditional muscles, or limb muscles, like leg or arm muscles, where we would actually lift some weights or put some resistance, and these muscles get exhausted, and then we have to give them a few days to recover before we can work them again. And they get bigger as a result of working them out, or stronger. Our core muscles are switched on all the time. They essentially hold us in an upright position. So these muscles are used to being worked all the time, and they need to work all the time. So we can actually work them more frequently than we can with other types of muscles. So, as much as we say strength training is very, very important for us as we get older, because the more muscle mass we have, the stronger our bones are going to be right through our body, and less vulnerable we are to bone illness and muscular degeneration. It is very important that we keep our core muscles working as fluidly and as smoothly as possible in our day-to-day movements, so that we can actually do our strength training efficiently without getting injured. I'm going to be going through just a few exercises that involve working the core. Now, some of these exercises don't actually actively work the core. The core has to switch on in order to keep the body stable to actually do the exercise. So you'll see that we're not really moving the core quite often in these exercises, but it is having to actually work to hold us in the exercise, in the movement. Bit confusing? Come on down to the floor with me and I'll show you. In this first exercise, we're going to be lying down on our backs and bringing our legs up into tabletop position and extending our arms up towards the ceiling. So for this one, having those knees and feet hip distance apart, what we want to do here is actually press that belly button down towards the floor. And we want to try and you may or may not completely imprint the floor with your back, but you want to try and keep yourself essentially as sort of pressed down into the floor as you can. Bring those shoulders down and back. And from here, we're going to be taking one leg away, bring it back in, and then taking the other leg away. Now, as we're doing this, we're trying very hard not to arch that back. So we're using our core muscles to hold our spine in that position. And how we make this now more difficult is by adding opposite arm and leg. So some of our back muscles are now coming into play a lot more with this exercise, right through our spine. So for this one, breathing out as you take those arms and legs away, breathing in as you bring them back in again. And keep going with this exercise, making sure that you're keeping those shoulders away from those ears. Keep pressing downwards through that belly button area so that we're trying to keep our spine completely stable so it's not arching at all. Now, sometimes the coordination can be quite a challenge when you're first doing this exercise. So if that's a bit too hard, just start by just doing the legs as I did before, or just doing the arms. And then as you're getting better with it, you can add a bit more. If you find that your arms don't make it all the way to the floor, just go as far as you can without lifting those ribs. So you're trying to not arch that back at all. So those ribs stay down the whole time. Our next exercise is the plank. Now, this is can be quite a hard exercise if you have never, done it consistently enough to get good at it. But it is just a matter of practice with it. So when you're actually starting doing a plank, you can either do it on your wrists or on your elbows. And what you're trying to do is get to the set yourself up so that you've got a straight line going from your knees to your shoulders in this position. So regardless of whether you're in that position or not. So if you think from your shoulders right down to your knees is a straight line. What you don't what I see quite often is bottoms up in the air. And therefore the shoulders are not on top of the wrists anymore. And often people will come into this position because they just don't have the core strength to actually hold it for very long. So you are better off just holding for a little bit, coming back, and then coming forward and getting into the right position again, which is a bit more challenging. Do be careful when you're doing these planks that you're not letting your lower back arch. You want to keep your spine in that neutral position the whole time. So what I tend to see quite often is from this position, it gets a bit hard and people start arching like this. The hips go forward. What this does at that point is it actually puts a lot of strain on the lower back. So you really want to make sure that you're not letting the hips go towards the floor. And a lot of injuries that happen in gyms with people doing planks is because they're just letting the hips go down and they're not pulling away from the floor through that midsection at the same time. So it is a sort of exercise that requires a lot of, postural endurance to actually hold it. And it's just a matter of practice. If you are at the point where you're on your knees and you're very close to doing it on your toes and you can't, what I recommend is taking one leg up off the floor, then bring the other one up and then come straight down again. So you're not changing, your torso stays in that same position, it's just the legs coming up and down. And then as you get stronger, you can spend more time on your toes doing it as well. Now the next exercise is actually also a member of the plank family of exercises, and it's what we call a side plank. And in this area, we're really honing in on the oblique muscles, which are on our waist, our sides. Now, very many people can be quite strong in the core, but quite weak in this area. And very often this is the missing link to actually being able to move efficiently. Or if you're a little bit sort of rolled forward in one hip or rolled back, it's often because there's a little bit of instability through this area as well. So to start off by doing side planks, I'd suggest either on your wrist or on your elbow, which is what I'll do for this one. Make sure that your ribs and your hips are right on top of each other. And then what I like to do is imagine I've got a rope around my waist, like a noose, and it's connected to the ceiling. And from there, essentially, you're pulling yourself up from the waist off the floor and then back down again. You can, when you're starting, do this just having one hand on the floor, but trying to get to but that will actually lead you forward. So you want to get to the point where your ribs and your shoulders are right on top of each other and you're able to hold that for a period of time. Often we're weaker on one side than the other when we do this as well. And you'll find that regular practice will slowly try and make that inconsistency a lot less obvious as well between the two. And then from there, you build your intensity by also raising those hips off the floor, or raising one leg off the floor, or adding a little bit more of a flowy effect to it, so you're actually moving while still maintaining that stability as well. Now, did I mention that you also have to do the other side? It's very easy to favor your better side when you're doing these exercises, but really try and focus on which of the two sides often need more building than the other to try and rebalance your body. This final exercise is a classic Pilates one. It's called hundreds, and essentially we're holding ourselves in an abdominal curl for 10 breaths. So it is an exercise that will go for over a minute, and I do offer easier variations of this in my online classes as well, in my membership. But it is a type of exercise you can actually adapt depending on what your current level of fitness is. You can either do it with your feet on the floor, in tabletop, extending up towards the ceiling, or away at a little bit of a tangent. And from here, start with those arms straight up, breathe in to start with, and curling yourself up, holding yourself in this position, keep pressing that belly button down. And from here, we're doing nice slow breaths. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And keep going with that one. We're doing it for 10 breaths. The whole time we're doing it, we're just keeping those fingertips really, really long, just a small up and down movement in sync with our breathing, pressing that belly button down. If you do need to, you can take one hand, place it behind your head to just keep your neck supported, and eyes looking in a forward direction. So it is really quite exhausting right through that midsection, doing it for 10 breaths. But it does work on the endurance right through there. We're holding our spine in place, we're holding those abdominal muscles in place as well when we're doing it. I hope you found this video useful and informative, and that you can see yourself incorporating some of these exercises or these types of exercises into your daily routine. Thanks again for tuning in. And if you haven't done so already, can you please subscribe to my channel below? Thank you. See you next time.